The deadly Ebola virus disease, EVD, plagued the original countries of the Mano River Union, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone in 2014 and 2015, generating the worst ever Ebola outbreak in the world. This exposed the weaknesses of the health systems and massively caused the deaths of thousands. The region is marred by intense poverty, and women are beleaguered with the stress of caring and supporting the family the most. The cause of the index case of the outbreak is still unknown. It is reported to have started with a child and had sequential impact on the mother, grandmother, sisters, and subsequently several other countries and people. Many accounts of Liberian history were oral and passed on from one generation to another by word of mouth. People sat around fire hearths and listened to their wise ones narrate what happened in the past. These were not documented in a proper manner. Some were seemingly distorted, while others were recorded by people not from Liberia. However, the first documented female Liberian movement was recognized as the National Liberian Women's Social and Political Movement and dates back to the 1920s. Their works were considered for mainly social activities that entertained the men.
The one that we heard about was not really a women group, but it was like when presidents are coming into the county or when ministers are coming into the county, then the wives of the superintendent, the mayors, at that time, women to be mayor and other things were not around yet. So then they would gather together and take care of the entertainment. And they just call themselves the Pastor Women Development Association at the time.
Some women were recorded to have been at the forefront of national politics, but people consider them to have been the regular roles of women with the gender stereotypes except for Matilda Nipot, Madame Swakoko, and Angie Brooks Randolph, among few others.
We also know the history of elections in Liberia, that up to 1985, we always had a ruling party winning almost 100% of the votes in the country. So that was one milestone in Liberian history. There are also other milestones that we have not documented, in terms of how women contributed. There are women who are seen as famous, well-known in the country, including Ellen Mills Scarborough and other people. The story that needs to be told is the fact that Liberia is a country that is separated in terms of urban and rural divides. So when we talk about women, who are the women that we're talking about? Is it the Ellen Mills Scarborough? Today, is it the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf? Or is it the Madame Swakoko and other women who are making changes in their community?
The Women Development Association of Liberia, with the acronym WODA, was founded prior to the Civil War in 1988 to enhance the social, economic, and seemingly the legal status of women. It fosters women's leadership in community development and decision-making.
And they didn't have it as an organization on the ground. So what they did was they mobilized women from the churches. And at that time, I was the president of my church, women. So I was sent there to represent the women. I think I carry a group of a delegation of maybe 10 or more women. Then I met Ruth Caesar, Dr. Ruth Caesar, and I had known Ruth because we were on the same mission at one time, Riggs Institute. And there we met. After we met, then they brought they started working with the abused women and girls. And we decided to actually form into a real organization.
Liberia Women Initiative, LWI, was founded during the war in 1994 because women thought that their relief efforts were inadequate and became zealous to make more contributions to their country by concentrating on restoring total peace to the motherland. The civil war continued to wreak persistent terror on the population. The Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace in 2003 brought together women from diverse religious and other socio-cultural backgrounds. They included Christians, Muslims, American-Liberians, indigenous, illiterate, and the educated in a non-violent field appealing for peace. The women fully crafted their involvement, carefully defined what they want in the journey to peace.
We went there that day and we were fed up and tired of every day, different story. No one is meeting. Meanwhile, they were shelling Liberia. So we got there, and I had been in the office at WANEP, one of the NGOs that was our parent NGO, and reading on the internet, a missile had fallen in Monrovia at Newport Street. Children who were brushing their teeth had been crushed. I just started crying because they were the ages of my two boys. And I just told myself, so I went to the Peace Hall. Sugars was there, we were sitting, we had gotten some little money. I said, Sugar, send for more women. She said, Lima, what are you going to do? I said, just send for the women. And the women came, we decided we'd barricade the hall, that those in the Peace Hall would not come out. We're going to allow the foreigners to come out, but we're not going to allow the Liberians to come out.
Women's influence in Liberia led to Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's election as the first female president in Liberia. Immense efforts have been made by women to enhance their role through education, the quest for equality, strive for excellence, and fight against the vices that affect them.
December 2013.
Guinea. There are reports that a 2-year-old boy has an unidentified hemorrhagic fever. Health authorities suspect an outbreak of Lassa fever and alert the sub-regional counterparts. He dies in December 2013 in the village of Meliandu, Gekedu Prefecture. His mother, sister, and grandmother then become ill with similar symptoms and also die.
2014, March 18.
Guinean health officials announced the outbreak of a mysterious hemorrhagic fever. 35 cases are reported and at least 23 people die.
March 22.
Guinea confirms a previously unidentified hemorrhagic fever which killed over 50 people as Ebola.
March 24.
2 suspected cases in Liberia are announced by the Liberian Ministries of Information and Health. The government had previously stated that Ebola had crossed into Liberia, but the information was not confirmed.
March 27.
The government of Liberia updates its report stating that a lady had crossed from Guinea and reported at a health facility in Foya, Lofa County, northwestern Liberia, and she died. Samples are taken for test abroad.
March 31.
Liberia reports 2 Ebola cases. Suspected cases also reported in Sierra Leone.
April 1.
Medical Charity Medicine Sans Frontières, MSF, warns the epidemic spread is unprecedented, but the World Health Organization WHO spokesman calls it relatively small still.
April 12.
New cases are reported in Margibi and Montserrat counties, raising the total number of counties holding patients with EVD to 4.
May 26.
WHO confirms first Ebola deaths in Sierra Leone.
June 17.
Ebola reaches the Liberian capital, Monrovia.
June 23.
With deaths above 350, making the West African outbreak the worst Ebola epidemic on record, MSF says it is out of control and calls for massive resources.
July 25.
Nigeria confirms first Ebola case. A Liberian-American man, Patrick Sawyer, dies in Lagos after traveling from Monrovia.
On July 27.
Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf declares the country's borders closed. Some exceptions, such as Rabas International Airport, remain open with the addition of screening centers there. Salif also announces that football events are banned, schools and universities closed, and the worst affected areas of Liberia to be placed under quarantine.
August 2.
A U.S. missionary physician infected with Ebola in Liberia is flown to Atlanta in the United States for treatment.
On August 6.
President Salif announces a state of emergency in Liberia, remarking that certain rights and privileges will be sacrificed in doing so.
August 8.
WHO declares Ebola international public health emergency.
On August 11.
The Ivory Coast begins banning flights from neighboring Liberia.
August 19.
The township of West Point is entirely quarantined by President Salif in an effort to halt the spread of EVD.
On August 20.
Security forces fire shots, tear gas to disperse crowd trying to break out of quarantine in West Point, killing a teenager.
August 28.
WHO puts death toll at above 1,550 once outbreak could infect more than 20,000 people.
August 29.
Senegal reports first confirmed Ebola case.
August 30.
The quarantine of the neighborhood of West Point, Monrovia is lifted after riots on August 20.
August 31.
Liberia begins denying sailors from entering or disembarking from vessels at the country's 4 main seaports. By the end of August, WHO statistics show 3,707 cases and 1,808 deaths overall.
September 1.
The Ivory Coast loosens its ban on travel into Liberia by opening several humanitarian corridors between the two countries.
September 7.
U.S. President Barack Obama says the United States needs to do more to help control Ebola to prevent it from becoming a global crisis.
September 8.
WHO reports that EVD is present in 14 out of Liberia's 15 counties. The remaining county without confirmed cases is Grangeda County. United States says it will send 25-bed military field hospital to Liberia to care for health workers.
On September 13.
Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf appeals to President Obama and the world for urgent aid in tackling Ebola.
September 16.
The United States promises to send 3,000 military engineers and medical personnel to West Africa to build clinics and train healthcare workers.
September 19.
Streets in Sierra Leone are deserted on a 3-day lockdown to try to halt Ebola's spread.
September 20.
Liberian Thomas Eric Duncan flies from Liberia to Dallas via Brussels and Washington after trying to help women with Ebola in his home country.
September 22.
A new 150-bed treatment center is open in Monrovia, with patients arriving on the day of its establishment. WHO declares outbreak largely contained in Senegal and Nigeria, but says Ebola has killed more than 2,811 people in West Africa.
September 25.
Duncan goes to Dallas Hospital with fever and abdominal pain. He is sent back to apartment where he is staying despite telling a nurse he traveled from West Africa.
September 26.
Cuba says will send nearly 300 doctors and nurses to West Africa to join 165 healthcare workers due early October.
September 28.
Duncan returns by ambulance to Dallas Hospital.
September 30.
CDC confirms Duncan has Ebola. First case diagnosed in the United States.
October 1.
WHO says 3,338 dead out of 7,178 cases in West Africa.
October 2.
NBC News says American freelance cameraman in its employ, Ashoka Mokpo, has Ebola, will be flown to United States for treatment.
October 8.
Duncan, the first person diagnosed with Ebola in the United States, dies in Dallas Hospital.
October 12.
Nurse in Dallas tests positive for Ebola, becoming first person to contract the virus in the United States. Nina Pham was infected while caring for Duncan at Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital.
October 15.
U.S. officials say second Texas nurse who treated Duncan has contracted Ebola.
October 19.
Nigeria declared free of Ebola.
October 21.
Cuba sends 53 doctors and nurses to Liberia and another 38 to Guinea on a mission to treat Ebola patients.
October 22.
NBC freelance cameraman Ashoka Mukpo is declared free of the virus and leaves hospital in Nebraska.
October 23.
Mali becomes 6th West African nation hit by Ebola.
October 24.
Dallas nurse Nina Pham is free of Ebola and leaves the hospital.
October 29.
Ebola appears to be slowing in Liberia, WHO says.
November 3.
Mali is believed to be free of Ebola, but health officials are still searching for 39 people who traveled on buses with a toddler who died from the virus.
November 5.
WHO revises deaths downward for second week running. Posts toll at 4,818 out of 13,042 cases as of November 2. Says they are still seeing slowdown in weekly cases in Liberia. Guinea is stable. Incidents of Ebola still rising in Sierra Leone. President Obama will ask Congress for $6.2 billion in new funds in U.S. fiscal year to fight Ebola in West Africa and the United States. China plans to send some 1,000 medical workers and experts to West Africa.
November 13.
Liberia ends its state of emergency.
December 10.
Time magazine names the Ebola fighters its Person of the Year.
December 29.
Confirmed cases exceed 20,000 and confirmed deaths exceed 7,800.
2015. January 3.
Confirmed deaths reach 8,000.
January 18.
Mali is officially Ebola free.
January 21.
Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia all report the lowest weekly infection rate since August 2014. Guinea had reopened its schools and universities.
January 24.
Liberia reports just 5 confirmed and 21 suspected Ebola cases across the country, indicating a likely termination of the virus transmission.
February 16.
Confirmed cases exceed 23,000 and deaths are over 9,300.
March 5.
Liberia releases its last confirmed case of Ebola.
March 20.
Liberia records its first case of Ebola in more than 2 weeks.
May 1.
Cases are over 26,300, while deaths reach 10,900. The outbreak is nearly over in Liberia with no new cases in weeks. It is averaging 10 cases per week in Sierra Leone and is still fully out of control in Guinea with several new cases per week.
May 9.
Liberia is officially Ebola free.
2016. January 14.
West Africa declared free of Ebola transmission, marking the official end of the epidemic. Ebola returns to Liberia on March 31. With the Ebola outbreak having its toll on every sector of the Liberian society, the fight became everybody's business. Liberian young women and groups started initiatives that helped reduce the rate of infection. CNN senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen and team visited Liberia, caught up with a young nursing student in Kakata outside Monrovia, and reported an incredible story.
2 months ago, Fatu Kekula's father got Ebola.
He started to put on the symptoms, the vomiting, the stooling, the fever.
3 hospitals turned Fatu's father away. Fatu had little choice. She took her dad home to treat him herself. Within days, 3 more people in the house got sick, and Fatu, a 22-year-old nursing student, had to become a one-woman Ebola hospital.
I was treating them all by myself, no one around, all by myself, all alone.
Isolating her sick loved ones in separate rooms, her mother, her father, her cousin Alfred, and in there, her sister Vivian. So you were running all around the house, taking care of them.
Yes,
They must have been so sick.
yes, they were very sick.
Could they eat? Incredibly, Fatu didn't get sick. How she managed that will astound you.
I developed my own protective care. I bought black plastic bag, plastic jacket, glove, rain boot, long trousers, hair cover, mask to my nose, everything.
So this is it. You're done.
Yes,
This is how you took care of 4 people with Ebola.
yes,
This is what happens when hospitals turn people away. You became inventive.
yes.
Unfortunately, Fatu's cousin Alfred didn't pull through. But Fatu saved her father, her sister, and her mother from Ebola.
I'm very much proud of Fatou Kekula for the marvelous work that she did through the power of Almighty God.
Do you owe your life to her?
More than my life, because I can say, even though God saved me, but she saved my life also.
UNICEF heard about Fatou and was inspired by her. Now they're teaching her trash bag method to other people.
I'm feeling proud of myself.
You're quite a nurse.
Sure.
And you're not even officially a nurse yet.
No.
Elizabeth Cohen, CNN, Kakata, Liberia. Wearing trash bags as protective gear, this nursing student single-handedly treated her mother, father, and sister who had Ebola all at the same time. Remarkably, Fatou Kekula didn't get infected. When we met in September, the Ebola outbreak had cut short her final year of nursing school. Why do you want to become a nurse?
Yes, I said I want to become a nurse in order to save life. And I want to serve humanity. I don't like to see people suffering.
After Fatou's story ran on CNN, donations poured in from around the world to help continue her education. In January, the 23-year-old said goodbye to her family and her home in Liberia. And after a trip halfway around the globe, she showed up in America, bundled up for the first dose of winter weather in her life.
I'm so happy to be here.
A temperature check at the airport confirming she didn't have a fever, one of the first symptoms of Ebola.
But Fatou didn't end up just anywhere. By a sheer twist of fate, she ended up in my backyard, Atlanta, Georgia, at one of the top nursing schools, Emory. So come here, let me show you their simulation lab. They have mannequins, drugs, tools, everything that she needs to develop new nursing skills that she can take back to Liberia.
I learn new things every day.
You see a lot of these in Liberia, correct?
She asked her teacher, Kelly Fullwood, to teach her how to treat burns, a common injury in Liberia where children often fall into open fires used for cooking.
So how's she doing?
She's doing fantastic. She gets nursing. She gets what it's about.
And she has months of training still ahead of her.
To leave Liberia, where I know you loved your family so much, that must have been a huge decision.
It's a huge decision, but I took that decision in order to help my country. New skills, new knowledge that I have learned, from here I'm going to take it back to Liberia and help teach my fellow nurses.
You saved 3 lives.
Yeah.
You think you can save more?
More.
This week at an Ebola symposium, Fatou met former President Jimmy Carter. An extraordinary journey for a woman who just 8 months ago escaped Ebola, protected by trash bags. Elizabeth Cohen, CNN, Atlanta.
Brenna Brewer Moe, Joyce Kilipo Jawolo, and Naomi Tule Solanki are also 3 young Liberian women that separately worked assiduously in their technical capacities to fight the outbreak.
Phil supported us to plan our Ebola response and also to do research, go around the country to do social mobilization.
We take the first set of lessons to the families in the communities and then go back to check on their progress after 2 to 3 weeks to see if the family members, whether it's the bigger sister, the older sister or brother, actually made time to tutor the younger ones. So if they've completed that set of exercises, we give a new set. And all of the lessons that we try to provide for the families are aligned with our Ministry of Education's curriculum, so that whatever they do learn during this crisis period are things that they can use when schools are reopened.
Because of the nature of the signs and symptoms of Ebola, and based on the high illiteracy rate of Liberians, people were in denial. They said it was myth. Some people feared that it was created. So because of that, in our already weak and fragile healthcare system, the disease was just all over. There was no control. It caught everybody unaware. So we felt that there was a need for us to intervene. So we decided to use community-based approach.
While international efforts concerted the downward trend of the virus, these young women, along with several untold stories, point to the local ownership of the Ebola fray. The international organization with strong local visibility, ActionAid had been involved in Liberia working on women's issues for a long time. They then joined the Ebola fight using their regular, predominantly local approach.
We started with food items, Ebola response items like chlorides, chlorine, buckets, started reaching out. That we started first of Bomi County. And then we did Magibi County again, and then we did Mashara County. There's like 3 areas we started from first.
How you can counter Ebola and prevent Ebola as well.
And then the shirt, wherever the shirt stops.
We're telling you the resolution. If you come here, you see, and we tell you the resolution for you to use, and we save you from skin cancer.
ActionAid had absolutely no program to directly fight a disease outbreak like Ebola, except its HIV Women Network programs that point to more advocacies and women's empowerment.
People know ActionAid to be people who are focused on the rights of women, child rights, youth empowerment and governance issues. But then we had to change the direction of our program because of the interruption of Ebola. The office did not want to close and say, okay, because there's Ebola, so it wouldn't work. So that's how the Ebola response team came in, and we started reaching out to the people in these communities we already work with, giving them, protecting them, giving them supplies, and making sure they are okay and safe.
It's not the number of women who died, it's about how women's spaces, whether it was their business spaces or their families or their health, how all of these things disintegrated because of Ebola, and how difficult it's going to be for women to now sort of reintegrate into the society. If they are survivors, what does it mean for them? If you look at the different modes of transmission, what does it mean for a woman, especially if she's going to have a child? We've seen the new cases that have come up. If she's going to have a child and she goes to the hospital and say, I am an Ebola survivor, what would be the response? So all of those things, we thought that it would be good to look at the impact of Ebola in a specific way as it relates to women's rights, as opposed to just the number of deaths.
During the season of Ebola, from the initial stage, a lot of women were affected. Women were the front runners when it came to caregiving and just paying attention to what was happening in the entire, in all of the countries that were affected by Ebola. And especially from my end, I had a foundation called the Yombi Cares Foundation. I'm a woman. I took that risk to get involved because of the heart that women have. They always will go in there out of sympathy and care. And a lot of women did that in this country, and not even thinking about what emergency that was and the danger in it. The focus was to save lives. The focus was to make sure that people were comfortable, especially people who were ill with the virus and families around them, and to be treated and sensitization, all of those things. A lot of women were involved with it because a lot of women were affected.
ActionAid used its global resources to support local groups like Public Health Initiative of Liberia, Kids Educational Engagement Project, Community Healthcare Initiative, and the Bassa Women Development Association, among several others, to use community-based approaches to eliminate the Ebola outbreak. The approach filtered through ActionAid existing programs and projects.
When Ebola started, there were a lot of meetings we all were attending, and at those meetings, each time we went, every day the cases were just getting high, and you had this story of don't touch, don't do this, don't do that, but no one was saying what actually we should all be doing. So it was predicated upon that. Along with ActionAid, we sat down, and ActionAid being an institution that pioneered the issue of women's health and rights across the world, and particularly in Liberia, we sat together, and I, coming from a public health background, we sat down together and said, okay, I think With all these things, we all know the traditional roles that women play in the family. And besides that, in the issue of trade, with the fact that Ebola was coming from across the border, and we had a lot of women that were involved in the cross-border trade and so forth, we said, I think it is about time we reach out to those women, empower them with the requisite information, knowledge, and skills and materials to be able to lead the fight in their communities, because they are the first caregiver in the community before even the healthcare worker is elected.
We work in 3 counties, Montserrado, where we reached 3,000 children under my organization, Keep Directly. And then we worked in Grand Jide and Bapolu counties for Honor Action AIDS funding.
Because of the nature of the signs and symptoms of Ebola, it had, and based on the high illiteracy rate of Liberians, people were in denial. They said it was myth. Some people feared that it was created. So because of that, in our already weak and fragile healthcare system, the disease was just all over. There was no control. It caught everybody unaware. So we felt that there was a need for us to intervene. So we decided to use community-based approach.
We brought in 700 hospital beds to donate to the government and over 1,000 boxes of medical supplies. It came from different organizations like Christian International Ministry, an organization called Through the Hands in Pennsylvania, and Action Aid also in Pennsylvania. They help with those materials. Those would be very helpful because patients that had Ebola during those periods and had to sleep on those hospital beds, those beds had to be either burned or destroyed because no other patient could use them. So our focus should be capacity building and also trying to put the kind of furniture needed to move our health structure forward.
Rigorous efforts from the rural communities that Action Aid and partners covered throughout Liberia exemplified community-based approach and ownership as one of the best mechanisms to tackle a public health contagion like Ebola.
So KEEP, CHI, and Phil, they were responsible to lead our work in the communities. When they went to the communities, they also worked with the community-based structures. So the women groups in every community that we worked in, the Ebola Task Force, we targeted the women leaders who were in there. The Rural Women Association, we worked with them in all of the counties, that we worked in and it wasn't because we wanted to ignore the men. It was really because we had built a strong relationship with the women and we focused on the power of local organizations to be able to tell the message, give the message in a way that will be effective. We also look at the fact that women were going to be affected in a different way, so the women's rights implication. Then we also look at accountability. Who did we say were accountable in the beginning, even without the Ebola crisis? So we focus on women to be able to do that, and I think that was successful. So that's the Action Aid story.
Also been toileting like twice. Okay. Yeah, he has a history of liver problem. He's very weak as I speak. He hasn't eaten for 3 days, and the father has been calling the hotline, and there's no response.
Impact of Ebola on education. The Ebola outbreak had its toll on the already messy education system. A full academic year of learning was affected. Schools were closed and students told to remain home. By August 2014, nearly 5 million children were out of schools.
Million plus children in Liberia will miss half of the year on education. It will negatively affect them, their learning, their self-esteem, and there are a lot of things that will affect them in the society. Because things that they should have learned all of the time they were not in school, they will not have the time to make up for them.
Liberia and Sierra Leone use radio programs to provide continued education to students. Although these were seemingly good efforts to ensure education continues, the quality of these programs varied and the impacts were not measured with empirical data. It was very challenging to provide alternative education through radio because students were alone at home without a teacher who who could explain the materials if they had any questions. The programs also did not always distinguish between grade or class levels. There were also no means to ensure that students always listened. Kids were on a tender toe until groups like the Kids Education Engagement Project, KEEP for short, devised strategies to ensure that young pupils get lessons. KEEP's team did routine checkups to provide a level of education to the children. They gave gifts to encourage students to learn and concentrate on the lessons and play less.
Since we started, we've been able to go to about 15 to 20 communities around Monrovia, and we've been able to impact about 2,500 children. So basically what we do is that we take the first set of lessons to the families in the communities and then go back to check on their progress after 2 to 3 weeks to see if the family members, whether it's the bigger sister, the older sister or brother, actually made time to tutor the younger ones. So if they've completed that set of exercises, we give a new set. And all of the lessons that we try to provide for the families are aligned with our Ministry of Education's curriculum, so that whatever they do learn during this crisis period are things that they can use when schools are reopened.
Parents were elated that the innovation provided a level of instructions to keep pupils abreast with their lessons.
Our children, they were just sitting home, no teaching, nothing at the camp. But since they started coming around, our children, they have started to learn something again.
We are just praying to the government to please help us to calm down with the Ebola situation that they want to open all schools for our children. And also thank you to you people that have been doing wonderful things for us, sharing books to our children, and come around today to see how best we are trying.
I feel happy that our students are returning, having spent about 7 months away from instructional arena, which made some of them to engage in other vices. That they can come back now is very important for them, for us, their parents, and the nation.
Well, I'm so happy to be back in school because we had to sit home for 6 months doing nothing. And finally, we are back in school. I'm grateful.
Well, as for me, the Ebola situation was very bad because many of our friends during the break, some of them got pregnant because of the same situation. And then we even lost our instructor, one of our hard-working instructor, Mr. Shelton, who was teaching us English. We lost him. It was very, very much bad for us.
Education is very important in everything we do. And if it's not just formal education, but once you become aware of something, you're educated. And if we don't do a lot of education and awareness with our public, with our people, you're going to have a lot of issues, not just with Ebola, but even in terms of advocating for our rights, even in terms of knowing what you're entitled to, knowing how to ask for what you're entitled to.
According to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, some 16,600 children were registered as having lost one or both parents, and they are primary caregivers to Ebola in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, but less than 3% have had to be placed outside family or community care. This immensely impacted the education of these children. There were problems with existing orphanages catering to orphans before the Ebola outbreak. Crowdfunding campaigns were used to help Ebola orphans return to school. Plan International Liberia warns of abject hardship and stigma being experienced by children orphaned by Ebola. Little did they know that Ebola would have caused their lives to change in a strange manner.
I lost 13 and my mother and father and my family. And I went to the Ebola center. I came back.
We went to the Dodostown area, the Neatonwind area, the Barclay Farm, Cotton Tree, Kakata, and also Unification Town. And we discovered that there were many orphans who has lost both parents.
Woman, my name is Shine William. From what we call Achievement Center for Youth and Children. We were the first people who came in the community to divide some rice for the children. We came today, we gave other small things. Capable, we get some children in them for the Christmas. But the way we listen to the story, we ourselves too, we are what?
These young kids experience the worst in their lives without parental love and care. There were little reports of violence against women during the outbreak. There were reports of rape, domestic violence, and abuse of women's rights, as were being perpetrated before the outbreak. There are several accounts of vices against women and girls that were not reported during the outbreak.
Well, one of the trends we noticed during the Ebola period was that violence against women became more prevalent, and it wasn't just that it was prevalent, but the attention of most of the service providers working on access to justice had turned towards the Ebola crisis, or they had shut down in terms of their own provision of services. So there were many cases, including some high-profile ones, that happened during that. But my point is, Ebola did not stop sexual violence in Liberia. People continued to rape, and the myth around Ebola that this is just something that the white people brought and is not going to do anything to me. Also, that message remains in many communities, especially communities outside of Monrovia. So sexual violence was happening, parallel to the Ebola crisis.
Okay, go ahead.
You say what you need? You can tell me what happened to you. Feel free, yeah? The thing that happened and make it, you come here today. From the time you move from here, you go. What thing happened there? During the Ebola situation, CH Rennie Hospital being a highly hit hospital, and even in this session, we were 3 members, nurse screeners. One of the person that was next to me as an assistant, she died from Ebola. And the person next to her too is a survivor from the Ebola. Presently, I'm the only person along with other groups that are working. So when it happened, the whole hospital was closed down. But with the hospital being closed down, people were still going on with their violence against it. Some people took it as opportunity, and people were afraid to come bring their cases to us because they felt that we all in Rennie, we are part of the Ebola group, so people were afraid of us to bring their case until after everything slowed down before they started coming one. And presently now, from the monthly basis, we are receiving 10 to 15 cases now. So they are not tired.
The deadly virus put a considerable strain on reproductive health services, with no way to conduct medical examination on alleged rape cases before the perpetrator was arrested. Teenage pregnancy got on the rise. Women and girls suffered the brunt of the outbreak as total breakdown of services that cater to their well-being could not operate.
Action A principally address the issue of young girls and women from the background, from the age range of 12 to 35, from that level. And we are looking at two issues to address traditional harmful practices again. Sorry for using the word harmful, but traditional practices affecting the livelihood, especially the health. Then we look at the issue again of access to justice. These are two things we are attacking: the cultural aspect and then the real statutory law, okay, under the law, okay. So these are our two areas we are targeting. Working with 25 girls for the Girls Club. We are working with another 25 girls in Bodowie. Then we are working with another 25 girls in Bojisi. Okay, so that's 75 girls we have working with. The challenges we are facing is the issue of legal system in Riverside County. Because when we track cases down, violence on women affairs, and the other issue is support, persistent non-support, okay, rape cases and things, because the pathways leading to the issue, when we follow the issue, we need a county solicitor to pursue the case for us. But in Riverside County, it's another ballgame. We do not have the solicitor to really push government arms. So in the end of our advocacy, we have broke down in that area. There's a gap in the area because you have to have the prosecuting arm. So if there's no prosecuting arm, you not expect for the judge to do for the prosecuting arm. Then the case is through, you call it non-prosecutor and all kind of things. They will do all kind of legal names. Then the girls will come back to us, but what you say you are fighting for us. Okay, our cases, there is no redress. So for us, again, our challenge. So we need to engage government too. We need to put their feet to the fire to complement our effort, to complement Action Aid, to make our work to move in that direction. Because Action Aid alone cannot do it. We got to build linkages with the government, with the national government.
But you want to post up to certain things. Isn't that what you're fighting for? Yes. Hmm? Yes. So you show you will really meet your goal. You will go to the end? Yes. Hmm? Yes. So the teenage pregnancy now, what effect is that on you?
Female genital mutilation, FGM, which is said to be a taboo subject in Liberia, appears to be on a drastic decline as a result of the Ebola crisis.
The culture practice is a tough issue, and it's very scary to talk about. Yes, when you are talking about it, you must know who you talk to, because you who doing the advocacy, your health will be in danger. So that is the most critical part in our work, because you will be talking about this, how you call it, circumcision of female, and be very careful how you talk about it. So we talk one-on-one, but we don't just talk it at the inception of the program. If we have gained their aspiration when in the program now, then we try to talk to, because we include the souls women there too. We include them. So after they come, we talk, then we play around that small. But let me tell you, you will be driving into troubled water, because your health will be important. So we just put it in. You think, what can we do to help our children to go to school, to remain in school?
The practice was banned during the outbreak, but did not stop. Several girls were said to have been stranded in what is known as the Sandy Bush in the country.
In Remorsess here is not as forceful as it were, okay? Because during the bush school, people were stayed there because they have some process for graduation. So Southern Kawa appealed that the process, those that were there, and Ebola met them there, let them go through their graduation. Then after that, nobody recruit again until otherwise order. So the ban is still in place. The Ministry of Internal Affairs still keep it in place.
In Grand Bassa and Bomi counties, girls remained in the bush school until the epidemic came to a measurable decline. In Bon County, the ban was enforced by the traditional chief of the county, but he could not police the practice throughout the county due to its occurrences in deep forest locales. There were also accounts of secret graduations in Bomi as Ebola waned so as to prepare for new bushes.
We have circular order number 13 and number 12 and 13 that have barred all bush schools until otherwise order. And I'm always almost on the radio reminding those that nobody, I repeat, nobody carry on any bush school activity until the Ministry of Internal Affairs can lift out the ban. You who will carry out any illegal activity in any area, in the name of our bush school, you will be dealt with culturally and traditionally.
FGM is practiced primarily in more than 30 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and in the West. In Liberia, it is practiced in 8 of the 15 counties and often defended as a cultural tradition. Proponents of such practice spread the belief it will prevent girls from having sex before marriage and make them more attractive to a future husband. It is also seen as a rite of passage into womanhood.
In Liberia, the way FGM is practiced is also a little bit different from how it is practiced in other countries. It is tied in with what we call the bush school or the traditional schooling. So strategically, they tend to differentiate the positive sides of that and then the negative sides of the practice. So educations are integrated with other things for that.
In late 2015 and early 2016, the female bushes are said to be closed, while the male traditional zoos have started enrolling new male recruits in consonance with the tradition of their ancestors.
Before even going to the ETU, we were stigmatized in our community. Our community members, when they noticed that we were sick, they used to call our house Ebola house. And then we have little children in the house, like 3 years old son. And I was breastfeeding a baby when I got sick, but she was not affected. I left every one of them home. And when we went back home, we met them there, but no one was able to take care of those children. Our older sister was not affected. She was the only one. No one ever used to go to our house. When they even pass in, they don't want to speak. And when we left the ETU, when we went home, our community people said they want to hear us 50 days before they can come around us to see whether we are still sick or we are safe, because they don't want us to affect them. And they never used to come around us until after those days, before they start coming around. So we were stigmatized.
Ebola has caused very, I can say, a serious problem for me, because like I'm saying, it sometimes it traumatizes me, because if I just sit and see how Ebola damaged my family. Sometimes I decided I can just think, I think and get confused. I don't know which way to go, where to do, or what to do. That's a lot of damage. I have no brother, no sister, no mother, no father, no anything. 6 persons. But I just bless God for a long life family who has been there in the family. I've always been in a position to counsel me, talk to me, and meet some of my needs.
When I came from the ETU, I was facing a whole lot of health problems. I started experiencing sore eye. My eye was really, really hurting. I couldn't see like for 2 weeks. The eyes were very red, and I went back to my center. And then I was told that once I survive from there, and that's none of their business, I should treat myself. I never had money at the time, so I went around a few other persons, and they were able to help me. And I'm even undergoing the treatment. As you can see, the eyes, even though it's not yet completely healed, but I know God is there. And again, I can experience this muscle pain, joint pain. Yeah. Those are the problems I usually experience since I came from the ETU.
We are part of the matter. What kind of issue I have?
Yeah, I was in Monrovia. I was living with my big brother. And my big brother's wife mother was sick in Cornwall. So I had to take her to bring her to our house. So when she was there, saying, "Oh, just waiting to do everything for her, bring food, feed her, all that one." So she died. And I would to get in contact with sickness. So later, people started dying in the community. In our house, 5 persons died. I got my brother to take her and brought her Nima. I got time brought they got to the big hospital. The way our family toileting, the people in the hospital, they abandoned me. There were 2 days. So my father came to me to the hospital. He punched medicine on me. Later, the ambulance came, they came in Monrovia to EWA hospital. I was there for 14 days. Later, they take me from there. They charged me, they give my certificate, everything. They came in back.
Women in Liberia use trade considerably as a means to educate their children and cater to their growth and development. The Ebola epidemic is said to have immediately stifled the economies of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone during the height of the outbreak.
We are losing customers are not coming there before.
Before the Ebola crisis would come, I used to have a lot of customers here, especially on the weekend. The place would be so packed. that I'm born by 11 o'clock in the night. But since the Ebola crisis, around 6, 5, I go home.
Tourism is a fast-growing sector in Sierra Leone, but because of the Ebola outbreak, investors, visitors are now scared away. And so most of the hotels now, the occupancy rates are very low. Most of the restaurants are not doing good business.
The World Bank Group estimated that the three countries lost at least $1.6 billion United States dollars in what they referred to as foregone economic growth in 2015 as a result of the epidemic. Cross-border trade halted with the closure of the borders in the three countries. The selling of bush meat was banned, thereby creating massive loss and going out of business to several female marketers across Liberia.
We've instituted a curfew that limits the movements of people
And that has had an effect on business, our cross-border trade, with our neighbors bringing produce across has stopped because borders were closed. So the whole thing is quite devastating for us.
The one where I've been reading Ebola here, it made the market money say go down because the town was setting to the horse. They said must sit down to the horses. We were sitting and eating the money, no improvement. But then now they say the Ebola open we can't hear. The small money that left we all. We can't come back, but they put them on one cross. They can say, "I'm not cross. They play not safe."
The airports and seaports witness fewer imports and exports, thereby resulting in a decline in key revenues collections by government.
We had 11 flights coming in, and now we're down to 4 flights, and hopefully we're not going to decrease.
I want to pronounce to the world and to announce that the Roberts International Airport within the Republic of Liberia is 100% Ebola free. We've had 0 incidents of elevated temperatures, 0 incident of passengers that are coming in or going out that had any signs or symptoms of Ebola. There has been no passenger, no case reported whatsoever of people coming through these walls to go from one place to the next. The one incident that did occurred at the James Spriggsby airfield in central Monrovia. It's a smaller airport.
Investors' repugnance further diminished 2015 growth estimates to 0.2% in Guinea, 3.0% in Liberia, and minus 2.0% in Sierra Leone, down from pre-Ebola estimates of 4.3%, 6.8%, and 8.9% respectively. As Ebola continues its rhythmic posture of returning to Liberia and other hard-hit countries in the Mano River Basin, the need for developing a strong resilience mechanism that addresses the issues affecting the ordinary cannot be overemphasized.
Our team of epidemiologists, including our partners, WHO, CDC, the government of Liberia, we are on top of this. We know what to do now. We can contain it. We can control it. No need to panic. We have the international support. Our integrated disease surveillance system is working well here, and so our team will continue to do the job that they're supposed to do.
This should resonate that now is the time for the government, its people, and development partners to initiate systems to speedily combat emergencies than to wait for massive loss of lives to ignite actions.